Hello, I'm Connor, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the world of lighting. Particularly, my experience is in the live music and club events sector. If at any point there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and I'll answer them as we go. There'll also be at the end an opportunity to ask questions. So I guess we'll make a start. I'm going to start with explaining the background of me, what I was like as a kid. So as a kid, around the age of 10, was when I discovered that I was very passionate about lighting. Two people in my life who I'm actually going to give a shout out to. My mum and dad, it's their 33rd anniversary today, and they have been two people that have been fundamental to my career. But my parents took me to a U2 concert at the age of 10, and I was absolutely wowed by the lights and the production, and that was kind of the moment that solidified how I was then going to take steps to basically make a successful career. I've always been quite nerdy. I've always been quite interested in taking things apart, putting things back together, and just generally wanting to be traveling and exploring and learning new things. So from the ages of 10 onwards, I joined a local theatre voluntarily at the age of 14, and I was there for about a year. At this point, I didn't really have much technical expertise, and they just took me on the basis of I was young, I was enthusiastic, I was keen, and I just wanted to participate. Around the same time, when I was 16, 17 onwards, I started at a live music, essentially a local promoter in Carshalton, an event called Rockstock, and I used to go along and I used to flash lights. At this point, that was probably my first paying job, and that was £40 a night, and it would be turning up at 5 p.m. and it would be finishing at 11. But as a 16-year-old, that was a great opportunity to get experience, to work with other like-minded people. Two of the friends that I worked with on that event, I still am very good friends with today, and they're both individually made successful careers out of basically where we all started together. Onwards from Rockstock, I went to the Brit School in Croydon for 4 years. When I was 16, I wanted to do production, but I couldn't, so I had to do media. So one of my courses was a BTEC in media, which hasn't helped me, but after media, I then went into production for 2 years. And the course was essentially a technical theatre arts diploma, a BTEC, and I completed that when I was 18. And once I was 18, I'd done lots of networking over the years. I'd done lots of school shows, volunteering stuff, lots of small live music, enough just to sort of give myself a foundation. While I was also in college, was a great opportunity. Being that Brit School was a performing arts school, it was a great opportunity to be around musicians. And when I was in college and when I was, late teens, a lot of my friends were musicians, which gave me a great opportunity to be able to go out and tour once we left. So one of my friends who's actually doing a talk next Saturday on the 5th, Mike Mallion, he's been one of my contacts for the last 12 years. And when we left Brit School, we then went touring together, which was the first of my touring experience. So we were we were basically in an old Royal Mail van that was converted into a band van or a splitter bus, and we would tour all the UK's various clubs, doing really terrible shows, like really bad shows, but they were great fun. And that was essentially where I then worked from the age of 18 to around 20. At the same time, I was also doing crew work. So I was working for crewing companies, and the crewing companies are essentially just they give labour support to productions. It's quite labour intensive. It's not particularly paid well, but again, it's all about getting experience. After the age of, after a couple of years of doing touring with Mike and other bands in the metal world or the gent world, I got my first full-time job, and that was with a company called PRG, or Production Resource Group. They took me on initially as a guy to relabel cable. So they bought a whole bunch of cable and they needed someone to sit and take sticky labels off and then put new sticky labels on. I actually found the contract for this job the other day, which was now 10 years ago, and they paid me £5 an hour to do this job. I did that job for 3 months because when you're starting your career, it's very important to just really put yourself on the line or put yourself out into any opportunity you can. So I was paid £5 an hour for 3 months, and then the way that the next role happened was it came up as an internal vacancy that they had production technicians. And a production technician is someone that will work for PRG full-time, as I did, and PRG would then send me out on the shows that they had booked me, or that they had bookings for, they had equipment rental for. So I was essentially just going along and setting up PRG's lights for them. I did that for 2 years, and I'll cover this sort of later in the talk, but it was a fantastic basis for me to start with PRG. It was a fantastic basis of using all the experience that I had I'd gathered over the last 5 years, or from my early teen years to the age of 20, where I could then take it into a professional setting. And it was from doing 2 years with PRG that really gave me the foundation to then progress further. The next part of the story is I worked for PRG for 2 years, but there was a 1 year crossover. This was in summer 2012 when the Olympics was on, and I was interested. I've always been interested in dance music. I've always been interested in club nights. I've always had a background in generally just being around music as much as possible. And I remember at that point, I also wanted to take a step for my career. I wanted to take a step into a new direction, which was, instead of setting the lights up, which is what I was doing as for PRG. So I wanted to be the operator. So I wanted to be the guy flashing the lights. Now, a fantastic opportunity for someone who wants to learn how to operate lighting desks is generally in the club setting, or for nightclubs. This is because you get hours and hours and hours of time to set up the console, and you can play with its various settings and features, and you can really get down to how it works. It's also, when you're working in a nightclub, they're quite fast-paced environments. They're not as set up sometimes as clubs and events can be, and they're really good opportunities to learn how to do something quickly and to learn how to fix problems without people noticing. So to continue on from the story, in 2012, I got a call from Heaven nightclub in London to basically join their technical team as freelance. Now, at that point, like I said, I was looking for a job to go and learn a new lighting desk, and it was a perfect opportunity. So I took that on. while I was still working at PRG, and in that year between summer 2012 and summer 2013, was probably one of the toughest years in my early career. This is because I was essentially working two jobs at the same time. But the reason I was working two jobs at the same time is because I was looking to wrap up the 2 years, or to wrap up PRG in 1 year's time. And I also knew I had, as a freelancer, I had to put myself on the line to say yes to Heaven and have a crossover from when I could finish PRG in summer 2013, which is what I did, to then working at Heaven more permanently. The plan worked, and summer 2013, I left PRG and I'm now working for Heaven. And I was also going out with some other bands at the time just to sort of keep myself touring. One of the bands was a band called The Magnets, and they were an a cappella group. They'd been going for 15, 20 years or so. So I was a very young guy on the crew. I was touring with people in their mid-40s, but it was a very sort of like family group. It was really good fun to be with people so experienced, and they I'm very grateful for. Took me all over the world. I have a really positive experience of a positive review of going to China for 3 times. Not a place that I would have ever thought I would end up, but I was 23, 24 at the time, and I had the experience of going down more or less the entire east coast of China, to every strange city that I've never heard of or can say that I can even remember. From working for Heaven and the Magnets and various other bands, it got to around 2015 where I'd done 2 years with Heaven just as a technician, and the head of lighting at the time was moving on, and Heaven were looking for a new head of lighting. Now, this is kind of where things really changed for me, because I was basically headhunted to be the new head of lighting for Heaven, and I held on to that job until January this year. And the experiences of working in a place that you really like being in. So I really like being in nightclubs from a technical perspective. I really enjoy the events. I enjoy, like I said, the fast-paced nature of it all. It's also a very challenging environment, and it gave me a great opportunity to learn how to manage a team. Not something that I'd ever done before, but I was kind of determined to just challenge myself. So I did Heaven for 5 years, and as I was working self-employed throughout this whole time. It also allowed me to go and work with other bands. So another point I'm referencing here is networking. When I was working at Heaven, it was a great opportunity for bands to come into Heaven, or for artists to come into Heaven, or more relevant, for technicians and other lighting guys that I would book to work on the club nights. One of the contacts that I made at the very start of my Heaven career was a guy called Miles Weaver. He's the lighting designer for Muramasa. He's the lighting designer for Neo and a couple of other bands. While I was working at Heaven, Miles would also send me out on his tours, because we worked together at Heaven. We knew each other's, we could trust each other to how we'd program the desk. And that's kind of been the basis of people that I've always worked with in the past are still now here in the future, and it's always just been a case of networking. And it's not like you go out of your way to purposely network. It is recommended that you do that, but the people that I now work with just so happen to be that are people that I started with, several years ago. I hope that makes sense. That's kind of taken me up to this year, and this year is has been an exceptionally strange one. So I left Heaven after working there for seven years. I decided it was time to move on. I found myself getting just a bit complacent. I wasn't really challenged anymore. I knew the place inside out. I had a good team of technicians, and I was willing to kind of step down and move on. The story for the beginning of this year is then I left Heaven. I had a couple of other bands that I was working for, so I went and did a tour with Muramasa, and also went and did a tour with James Arthur on behalf of the lighting designer called Frankie McDade, who's very lovely. But when we were out on tour at the beginning of this year, the shows started to get pulled, and it got to the middle of March and we were all sent home. Since March, I haven't really done much lighting. Heaven have very honourably kind of taken me back on board, even though I left on very good terms, and it's been of great benefit to be able to have them around and to be able to go back to Heaven. Heaven is kind of now operating technically as a restaurant or as a bar instead of a nightclub, but there's still a requirement for me to be there, and that's allowed me to just kind of get through this year. My main ambition is to go back out touring at some point, but as to anyone that's watching this, touring is probably got a big question mark next to it for the foreseeable. So it's kind of just now sitting tight and seeing what will happen. I will cover a bit more about the networking side of thing for my experience, and probably for generally what happens in the industry. So networking is probably one of the most important things as part of a self-employed freelancer's lifestyle. It's kind of there's no day which isn't really a work day, and that's purely on the basis that, let's just say you're in between tours, you're home for 2 weeks, but you've been invited out to a show to see one of your friends who's lighting an artist. You would go along because you want to see your friend light their show, but then it's also a fantastic opportunity to meet some of the other crew that will be on your friend's show. And networking happens in a very sort of in a very organic way. It's a very social experience. Maybe when you finish a job, you get booked for a lighting you get booked by a lighting hire company to go and work on a production, and then they say, oh, we're all going to go to the pub afterwards. Going to the pub afterwards is always a good thing, as long as you can, keep control. But it's a good opportunity to network, because that's when you really get to know who's doing what shows, who's doing what productions. And when you're talking to someone, you generally find that people go, oh yeah, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy too. And it's a way of sort of putting yourself amongst other people and getting familiar with exactly who does what. Networking has been pretty much the entire basis of my career, from the early days where I was networking with the local theatre, where I was networking with the local band night, to then networking in the Brit School, to networking in my crewing career, and going on festivals with the Magnets, then moving on to working in Heaven, having people come through on shows. It's a constantly, it's a constant, just not need, but it's the constant motion of just always talking to people and always being around people, and it's hugely important. It's probably one of the most important things to making a successful career. And it kind of reinforces the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know, because I can definitely say that for myself. I would also cover, let's have a quick look. I'll kind of go through a couple of proud moments and a couple of tough moments to highlight how the job can be. The job as a lighting guy essentially is, depending if you're a technician or you're an operator, is to light the band, to light the event, make sure that the client, whoever has booked you, is happy. And sometimes things work out, and sometimes things don't. Um, my working life has been quite challenging at times. At the very start of the career was probably when it was most challenging. And it was challenging because it was working quite hard. It was working quite hard for something that you wanted to be involved with, but it was always quite difficult to be involved with sometimes. I can probably explain that a bit better by saying it's important to really put yourself, like I mentioned earlier, to put yourself on the line and to try and volunteer as much as you can, to try and not worry too much about how much a job is when you're starting your career out. I was fortunate enough to have my parents support me as much as they could, and I was able to earn 40. I was able to agree to doing a job at £40 and then just working towards and building up my rates. But with over time, it's when the money comes, and the money shouldn't be the basis of why you do the job. It never has been for me, and I don't think it should be for anyone else. Obviously, it's very important. Everyone needs money to live, to pay their living expenses. But at the start of your career, it's important that you're doing your networking and you're building yourself for essentially whatever is next. A couple of proud moments for me. The moments that I've really gone, wow, this is great. Was when we've had Rita Ora come through Heaven. She came through to do an album release, and it was a half an hour club show. So we had a nightclub packed full of people. I was asked by their production manager to bring in a lighting package on their behalf, to program and set it up and run it for the show. And that was a very rewarding experience. Earlier on in my career, that was probably around 2018. Earlier on in my career, I had the privilege of working with Danny Minogue. Again, this was through Heaven. Heaven, for those that do or don't know, Heaven is a nightclub in central London in Charing Cross and runs the GAY events. Predominantly, it's based on the commercial pop music sector, and that's where a lot of my experience has mostly been. So Danny Minogue came and performed on the Pride event of 2015, 2016, and the owner of the nightclub asked me to be involved. I lit the event on behalf of Heaven, but then Danny went to do the Manchester Pride, and I travelled with Danny on her tour bus up to Manchester and lit her show, which was exactly the same as Heaven, but I then lit the show as well in Manchester. There's been other rewarding moments where this one is probably both rewarding and probably part of the tough moments list, was being part of the 2012 Olympics. This is when I was working for PRG. It was exceptionally rewarding to be part of a production that was globally known. The Olympics are huge, and being early in my career at the age of 20, 21, 19 even, it was a huge experience to be involved with, be involved with professionals that are working, at the top of their game. The Olympics is for many people probably a talking point on their CV. Being that I also said that it was part of the tough moments. With every career, you have your moments that really shine for you, and you have your moments that are moments that you really go, what the hell am I doing? And the Olympics was probably one of those moments. That was because it was in the early start, it was very long hours. It wasn't great pay, as I've mentioned with other experiences. It wasn't great pay, and I really had to commit myself to wanting to get to the next step or to wanting to improve myself. Um, it was I remember when I was working on the Olympics, it would be sometimes we'd be going back to back on productions. So we'd be going we'd be in the Copper Box basketball arena, from midnight to 6 a.m. To do some TV lighting, and then from 7 a.m. to midday, we would then go and do adjustments in the O2 arena for the badminton or whatever event was in there at the time. But it was quite hard graft because this was sometimes during this was the points that I'm referencing now is actually the live broadcast, and the lighting designers wanted us to just update some stuff. So we had essentially a live court below us, and we'd have to climb up into the ceiling, all with PPE, personal protection equipment, and harnesses and clips, and we'd all have to be trained on how to climb across roofs. And we would be literally hanging from the ceiling at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning for 12 hours. And I really remember just one time just knowing that I had to get through it, knowing that it wasn't forever, and knowing that I'm paid to do this, and I should be privileged to be part of it. And I was. It was exhausting though. The other tough moments in my career was when I was learning to be a manager for Heaven. I hadn't really had any managing experience. I was 23, 24 when they gave me that job. And it was a case of, as I explained earlier, I'd worked for Heaven for 2 years, and then I was given the manager's job. I was headhunted for the manager's job. And it was a case of, I needed to learn how to build a crew of technical staff, how to manage freelancers. Managing freelancers, by the way, is a completely different game to managing a team of full-time staff. It's usual for nightclubs, particularly, to have full-time staff. So they'll have, for example, let's just use Ministry of Sound in London, Elephant and Castle as an example. They would have, prior to the pandemic, of course, 3 full-time technical staff, and those 3 full-time technical staff would be able to cover sound, lights, and video. And they would always look after the club, and they'd always be there. And occasionally, when needed, they would drag in, or they would hire in, rather, not drag. They would hire in another freelancer to support their team. Heaven operated on a very different basis, where the entire technical team, which is more usual with live events as well, the entire technical team will usually be freelancer or freelance based. With Heaven, managing freelancers, you have to find people that are passionate, that want to be there, and are willing to work long hours. So a Heaven shift by default will between 8 to 10 hours. Sometimes there's been days that I've been working at Heaven for 18 hours, 19 hours, 20 hours a day. For example, when we do the New Year's Eve event, or the Pride event, or Halloween, Heaven has always gone out of their way to really put on a show. Or GAY, Heaven has always gone out of the way to put on a show. And as a technical manager, it's my responsibility to make sure that all those criteria for that production are met, whether it's lights, video, sound. There was a separate sound guy, but I would have to work, or a sound manager, but I would have to work with him to make sure that if I was playing video for the LED wall at the back of the stage, that we'd have to tie it in with the sound guy, and he would I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory, but you'd have to work as a team, and we'd have rehearsals in the afternoon sometimes for these things, and it was important for someone that hadn't managed a team before to be able to learn how to manage. Let me just have a quick look at my notes. I think this might be a good point to actually talk about the design process and what jobs fit into what jobs fit into a production, essentially. I myself have worked as a lighting designer, and I've worked as a touring lighting director. I've worked as a technical manager for a club. I've worked as an operator, and I think those four things has pretty much been the basis of my career. In addition to that, on the technical team, you've also got the production manager. You've also got the sound team. I'm not that familiar with sound, but you'll have the sound operator and you'll have a systems tech as well. You'll then also have the tour manager. And from a technical point of view, that's probably the basis of a sort of middle-sized show. When you then get into bigger events, you might have lasers, you might have pyrotechnics, you might have video, and each of these disciplines have their own department. Saying that, it's sometimes not unusual for a lighting guy to take on pyrotechnics, video, and lighting, of course. When I was working at Heaven, I was responsible for those three things, whereas the sound was just responsible for the sound. So let's just talk about the production manager. The production manager talks to the entire technical team, and the production manager then reports to the tour manager. Tour manager looks after it, the entire tour, whether that's band and technical. The production manager just looks after the production side of things. So the production manager will be familiar with anything sound-wise, anything stage management. They'll be familiar with all things that are going on with lighting. The production manager will be the person that will basically understand the concept of the show. They'll understand how each component fits, not necessarily how each component works. So the production manager won't necessarily be a lighting guy, but the production manager will know how to talk to the lighting team, and he'll understand some of the points. If, let's say, the lighting team are having an issue and they say, we have a moving light that's not working, the production manager will understand what a moving light is. Likewise, if the production manager is talking to the stage manager, the stage manager will say, okay, we need to spike, which basically means marking objects on stage. So if you have a chair on stage and it needs to go back to the same place, you spike it. The production manager would understand the term, okay, we need to spike it when the stage manager is talking. So the production manager is basically like the overseeing eyes of the technical aspect of productions. This is the case in corporate, it's the case in TV, it's the case in basically all events. You won't necessarily have a production manager. Sometimes it's left to the individual technician to look after just their one discipline. But on bigger shows, obviously, the more production, the more people, it's easy to have a production manager as the one point of contact for everything. Then let's talk about the lighting designer and the lighting director and the operator. Now, these can either be one person doing all three jobs, usually on smaller productions, or on larger productions. On larger productions, you actually have two people covering these roles, split up in different ways, or on even larger, maybe like TV shows and stadium tours and arena tours, you might have three people covering these roles. Now, the lighting designer is responsible for the visual look of it. So the lighting designer will say, okay, well, I want some lights in a line here. I want them to be pointing at the the downstage center or the vocals in the middle at the front of the stage. I want them to be pointing, the lights to be pointing them, and I want them to be red. The lighting designer is the visionary behind what you're seeing. The lighting operator would then be the guy that's listening to the lighting designer. So the lighting designer isn't necessarily standing at the desk. This is in reference to bigger shows. The lighting operator would then listen to this input from the lighting designer and be the guy that physically points the lights and makes it work. The lighting director is slightly different, where if a production goes out or if you're on tour, but the lighting designer is not there, the lighting director is basically the acting on-the-road designer. But on bigger shows, the show would have already been designed before it went out, and then the lighting director basically just looks after it on the road. So the lighting designer does the visuals, the operator does the inputting of what the lighting designer is saying, and the lighting director is the person that would then tour with it, usually as the operator as well. You would then have, as part of the design process, in reference to what we've just talked about there, the design process would be the lighting designer would talk to, let's just say, a band. I'm going to use Muramasa as an example because that's what I've been involved with in the past. Miles Weaver is the lighting designer, and I've been the tour director and the operator. Miles will talk to Muramasa, and he would say, okay, well, I've got this concept. I've listened to the album. I understand this is what you want from the show. The lighting designer and the artist will go backwards and forwards and basically build an idea together. And not necessarily a lighting idea, but an idea of how they want the show to look and what, if there are any special moments in the show that need attention. This would be the same for theatre. So if it's sort of like getting down to bullet points, important parts for the show, any specials, any special effects, or anything of detail. The lighting designer would then go away with these notes, and they would design a lighting rig on software. I'll cover software after this. They would design a rig or a lighting setup in 3D software, where they could also print off plans, and they would then take like 3D renders, or they would take computer generated images of what the rig would look like back to the artist and say, okay, well, this is the idea. Sometimes they might even do a demonstration. So they would do, using the 3D software, you can plug lighting desks in, and you can basically have a visualizer. Some, whoever's listening to this may be familiar with visualizers, some may not, but for those that aren't, a visualizer is a piece of software that allows you to visualize, well, the clues are really in the title, I guess, but it allows you to visualize what the lights would look like in, well, what the design would look like in real life. You can plug lighting desks into these visualizer, in these bits of visualizer software, and essentially control the lights as if they were real. Miles, using our example, would go back to Muramasa and say, here's some designs, here's some visualizer ideas. What do you think? At this point, it would go backwards and forwards, and it would basically, the details would be thrashed out about exactly what's right and what's wrong and how things need to change. At that point, this is all months before a tour has even started. The design would be confirmed, and if once the design is confirmed, it would then, depending on budgets, you'd then either get a lighting hire company involved. So a lighting hire company would be the people that are supplying, usually that we call them floor packages. They would be supplying the lights that go on the floor. When you're touring, you have either you either have a floor package, so just lights that you put out yourself, or you don't. But most venues will already have some lights in the ceiling. Some don't. To keep this to keep this example simple, let's just say we go into a venue that does have lights in the ceiling and we bring in our floor package. Miles, once the design has been confirmed, would book the floor package, which is included in his design. He would book the floor package with a lighting hire company. And once that's all booked and confirmed, we would then talk to venues that we're going to and say, look, we're going to be bringing in some extra lights. They're going to sit on the floor. Can we know what power you have available to plug our lights in? Can we know what lights you already have in the ceiling so we can work out if we need to bring anything extra? It would also be a case of saying, okay, well, we're going to have special effects. So we're going to have a smoke machine, or we're going to have, I won't use pyrotechnics because that's not quite in the world of lighting, but let's just say special effects like a low fogger, like a dancing on ice kind of like fogger kind of thing. That would all be advanced to the venue. So the venue and the actual production, which was part of this was kind of part of my technical management job at Heaven as well. When productions came in, was the band and the venue, or the technical team for the band rather, and the venue would talk together and basically say, this is what's happening. Can we bring this in? We want to have special effects. Is that okay? And everything would be confirmed. This is what, at this stage, this is what we call advancing, and basically pre-production, to make sure that when we actually turn up to the venue, everything is run smooth. Using the same example of Muramasa and Miles as the lighting designer and is the touring lighting director, Miles and I would then get together maybe a week or two before the show starts. Sometimes with big productions, it might go on for months. But we would then use the visualizer software that we use to sell the idea to the band, the artist Muramasa in this example. We would then use that visualizer software to start programming the lighting show. And it's a fairly straightforward process. We would sit in a room, we would listen to the music. We would have listened to the music, obviously during the design process, or just for our own enjoyment. And we would sit and listen to the music, and we would quite literally, with the desk and the visualizer, program how the lights are going to work, what they're going to look like. And it's a case of just working through and building a show in advance. If an artist says, okay, well, we're going to tour 2 albums, that's going to be 20 songs, you would program 20 songs. When you turn up to the show, or when you start doing the tour, you might only end up doing 15 songs, but those 5 extra songs have already been programmed, and you can then use if the artist wants to change the set list, and so on and so on. Our process as part of Muramasa was time coding everything. Now, time code is it's a tool that lighting use. It's a tool that sound, pyrotechnics, video, a lot of people use it. I don't think I'll particularly cover it unless there's any questions to do so. But time code is basically a way to synchronize lots of devices that are running the show together. So it allows them to all essentially at 10 seconds do something, or at 15 seconds. So they all know where 15 seconds is, they all know where 20 seconds is, so on and so on. It's a really handy tool, and we would use time coding to basically get the lights to do what we wanted to do, wanted them to do in time with Muramasa's music, in time with the song. So let's just say, for example, at the end of 30 seconds in, the intro finishes and the verse starts, we would have a lighting state on the lighting desk that would then change the lights for the verse. At 45 seconds in, the chorus would start, and we would have another lighting state that we would assign to 45 seconds, and so on and so on. And that's quite a simple explanation, but it can get quite complicated in how you assign things, and how we did for Muramasa. So essentially, when the show was actually running, the lighting desk was just listening to the time code and was triggering the lighting cues based on Muramasa performing and the songs being played. That's usually one way that the bigger shows and the bigger arena and production and stadium shows will run, because there's so much going on. It's important to keep the timing. However, there's also shows that don't have time code that can be very complicated and will physically rely on someone standing at the lighting desk and pressing the go button and making the lights physically flash. Going back to the design process, so we would be sitting, putting all the lights into the visualizer, and we would be programming the lighting desk to the time code. We would then basically run through the show with the visualizer a few times and make sure it all works. The way that we would set the desk up would mean that when the show actually goes out onto the production, all we'd have to do is make sure that the lights that we've programmed in the lights that we've programmed in the show file as part of the pre-production happens in real life, essentially. So it all ties in, and when we've gone working in the visualizer, we've worked with dummy lights, we call them, and we assign those dummy lights to real lights in the real world. It basically means that you design an entire show in a computer, and then in real life the physical lights are there, and you just link the whole thing together. So when you are then operating the desk, it then operates as the visualizer did. Once the show is then on the road, you would either have a lighting technician and the lighting director, or it would be the same person, tying in back to the parts of the technical team. So the lighting technician, if you're lucky enough to be on a tour where you've got a lighting technician and then you're the lighting operator, as I was for Muramasa, the lighting technician is the guy that's responsible to be on stage, looking after the power, looking after the data for the lights, looking after if there are any faults. Let's just say a strobe light breaks or I can't control it. I would speak to the lighting technician, and I would say, okay, I'm having a problem with the strobe on the right hand side. Can you take a look at it? That's a nice position to be in when you've got someone that's on stage and then you're at front of house. Front of house being at the back of the room where the lighting and sound desk would be. For my job as a lighting director, Miles had already designed the show with me in the visualizer before we even left to go on tour. I would now be there, understanding how he's built the show, understanding how the console has been programmed, and I would be basically the acting lighting designer. Miles wouldn't physically be there. It would just be my responsibility to carry on. It sounds in a funny way, to carry on his vision and to make sure that all the shows look exactly the same and exactly as they need to. Sometimes the lighting designer would be at the shows to basically see that it has all worked, and that he's not necessarily there to check that I'm doing the right job, but the lighting designer needs to be sure that the programming in the desk is right, and that what's happening in the visualizer does look like what's happening in real life. Some tours, however, if you get booked, I did a tour for James Arthur at the beginning of this year. James Arthur didn't book me, but the production manager booked me to work on behalf of Frankie, the lighting designer, and I was the lighting director, but I was also the lighting technician. So I was responsible for making the lights flash from the desk, and also to help plugging them in. There was one other guy. It was quite a large production. We had lots of LED sets, so we had large set pieces with LED strips down the middle, and we had probably an extra 30 lights to plug in and to set up every day. And it was important that I was also working as a lighting technician to make sure that the show was loaded in on time and it was all set up and it was all working. But it was also important for me to, as soon as the lights were all set up, to then go to the desk and start making the show look as though it's meant to be, or how it's meant to be rather. And once the show is essentially on the road, once it's touring, it doesn't really change. This example that I'm giving you now is kind of in the professional world and how the workflow happens. When you're doing sort of like club tours and you're doing smaller shows, you might not have, like I said, you might not have a production manager, you might not have a separate lighting technician, you might not have a stage manager, and you might be responsible for setting the lights up, flashing the lights, packing it all down, helping load the truck as well. It really depends on the size of the production, and how much resources can be budgeted for, but it's always good fun. It was good fun, has been good fun to be able to learn it all myself. I've individually, I haven't acted as a production manager as such. I've acted as a technical manager, which is slightly different. But I have worked as a lighting technician, and I have worked as a lighting director, and I have worked as a lighting designer, and that's been really handy for me to be able to understand kind of like how they all fit together, or how these roles all fit together. I would also just probably take this moment. I kind of covered it earlier about networking and about when I was talking about volunteering, that it is I think I have definitely covered, but it's very important to basically just try and say yes to as many things as possible. If you are really dedicated to doing the job that you want to do, if your job doesn't feel like a job and it's just a passion for you, just throw yourself in, really just throw yourself at it in every way you can, and you'll get a far better experience than not basically putting yourself out there. Maybe that's just from my own experience, and some people might feel otherwise, but I would say generally of the people that I've worked with my entire career have always been very passionate about what they do. It's always been the dedication to working long hours and having a good sense of humour. You probably make a good point to then sort of go on to talking about touring lifestyle and the mental health side of things, because touring can be hard. Touring can be really, really hard. It can also be a hell of a lot of fun, to say, so not to scare anyone off, but it can be a long time away from the people that you love or things that are familiar, and you can essentially sometimes land on tours. You can be booked for tours where you don't know anyone. There were occasions where I would go out on tours. For example, when I went and did this James Arthur tour at the beginning of this year, I didn't know anyone on that tour. The people that had been touring with James Arthur had been touring with him for 5+ years. I was just stepping in to help Frankie out. And it's really important when you're on tour to try and to try and be as nice of a person as you can, and to try and be nice and friendly and chatty. Generally, what you would find is people that get booked for tours have already networked quite a lot. A lot of people have said, "Oh yeah, this guy's a good guy," and even when I was recommended to Frankie by one of my close friends, he also knew Frankie and he knew the production, so he basically made the recommendation that yes, I would get along with people. I have touring experience, and I can be trusted to be put on a tour bus with 16 strangers, and for everyone to still get along fine. Being in part of a touring family is you work with these people, you socialize with these people, you explore new cities and new towns with these people, you travel with them, you share the same tour bus, you share you're living accommodation. It's you're with these people all the time. Some productions you'll be best friends with the band, usually smaller productions. On larger productions, the technical team will be one party and the artist and band team will be another. The James Arthur and Muramasa tours at the beginning of this year were the artist and the technical team all on one bus. And it means that you really get to know who you're working with, and it can be really, really good fun. And 99% of the time, people that you work with on tour are lovely people. The people that won't necessarily have been out on tour and haven't got along with others are usually people that then don't get recommended for future tours, or they're the people that don't get recommended to go and work on high profile events, or to go and work with smaller teams of people, or smaller productions that require that they require people to be happy, to be able to be committed to the long hours, to be and essentially just getting on with the job. So it would be kind of important to just be a nice person. Just be a nice person and being on tour. It can be tough, of course, because if you're working long hours, sometimes you might not get to eat. And particularly in my own experience, when I don't eat, I get quite grumpy. But I know that, and I try and manage it when I'm touring in a way that it's not to take it out on other people. Also, you can have times on tour that you don't sleep very well because you're doing really long hours, or you don't get a chance to actually go to sleep in a bed. There's been experiences in my past where I've travelled to a festival or travelled to a show on a Monday morning. I've done a show in a different country on a Monday night, and the Tuesday morning I've flown back home. There's been no hotels. It's literally just been fly there, do the show, and come back. Sometimes those kind of circumstances might happen back to back. So you'd fly to one show, do a show on a Monday night, Tuesday morning fly to another show in another country, do a show Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and so on and so on and so on. And it can be exhausting. Some productions will provide accommodation, and some productions will understand that, okay, well, we need to look out after our technical team, and they're going to need at least 4 hours sleep. It is like that sometimes, but that's to talk about what I was talking about earlier, weighing up your proud moments with your tough moments. The proud moments should really make it worthwhile. The tough moments are just the nature of the touring world. It's just the nature of how the job is sometimes. It can't be another way. I understand that a lot of people I just lost my flow, 1 second. I understand that a lot of people will think that the touring world is very glamorous, and that you get to work with artists, you get to go to countries, you get to explore everywhere. And yes, that is the case. It is a very honourable job to do. It is a very privileged job to be able to work with people that are talented, people that are love traveling as much as you would, have similar interests, and to be able to see the different parts of the world. The reality of it is sometimes you'd go to countries. I've seen the inside of more venues than I have of countries. For example, I flew to Japan during last summer. This was for Muramasa, and he was booked to do a DJ show. And it was a small team. It was me, the artist. His name is Alex. Wonderful guy. Love working with him. And one of their managers, a guy called Harry. So it was me, Alex, and Harry. And the three of us flew to Tokyo. We got there really early in the morning on a Tuesday morning, let's just say. The Tuesday night, we then had to go to the where the show was being hosted, and we had to basically check everything, make sure it all works. And then in the night time, the Tuesday night, we would then do the show. The Wednesday, we would then sleep, and then the Thursday morning, we would then leave. So sometimes we're flying to, destinations 14-hour flight away, and you're only there for 2 days, but you're not there to explore for 2 days. We luckily had the privilege of being able to spend 3-4 hours just to go for a wander. But you've flown all the way to Tokyo and you're only there for realistically 3 hours. Some other experiences that have been probably quite rewarding, but also quite demanding, was back in 2015. I was working in Australia. I was working on this is when I was working for the Magnets. I was working on the Adelaide Fringe Festival. And at the same time, my good friend Mike Mallion was with his band Monuments, and we're doing the Soundwave tour. So I went to Australia for probably just under 2 months. And I worked on the Adelaide Fringe Festival with the Magnets, and then I went and did a few weeks festival touring with Monuments. And one of the toughest moments was finishing all that up, and then I flew directly from Adelaide in South Australia straight up to 40 hours later in Finland, in a town called Kittilä, which is in the Arctic Circle, to basically go from 30 degrees plus to -10, all in the space of a day. That was an experience where I was working with Tesseract. They were one of the bands that I also used to work with. Also lovely guys, and I've always loved touring with them. They did a production where Jägermeister wanted Tesseract to perform on top of an ice hotel in the Arctic Circle in Finland. I'm trying to sort of explain it better, but it was sometimes brands will ask bands to promote them, or there'll be a sponsor, and the Jägermeister basically sponsored Tesseract to go and do a show. Tesseract asked me, or wanted me, to then do the lights for this show. There is actually the Tesseract documentary for Jägermeister on YouTube. And that was probably one of my most honourable experiences, to go through the first 3 months of the year, going from 2 months of the year rather, going from touring in the summer in Australia to doing festivals, to then flying all the way to Finland. But that was pretty much back to back, and it was a direct flight. Part of the production for Tesseract as well was that was all advanced. All the advancing for that was done more or less on flights around Australia. As I was flying between the festivals, I'd be having to sort of sit, and I would be having to draw plans and come up with ideas that when I then got off the flight and I went to the festival, I could then focus on the show that I was working with in Australia. And it's a constant, and it always has been. It's just a constant balance of trying to stay one step ahead, or trying to stay 2 steps ahead if you've got the time. It's unfortunate that the current circumstances have really taken away that fast-paced lifestyle, which I love, and a lot of other technician friends also really love. But it will come back, and I really do hope it will come back. I was also covering the touring earlier on, the touring lifestyle. I just covered briefly the mental health side of things in my own experience. I understand that the talk after me, Lena Lenman at 3 p.m. will talk a lot more about the mental health of the music industry. But I'll cover it just briefly from my own experience. I think anyone watching this will know how important mental health is in life. It's important in life, in your own personal life, but also in your working life. And the touring music industry maybe can be viewed as a lot of. It can be viewed positively and negatively. These days, it's got a much more positive persona, where the people that are going out touring are they look after themselves, they eat well, they try and exercise, they try and sleep well, they don't drink lots, they don't get involved with illicit substances and all sorts. In the past, maybe in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was more usual for technicians to be participating in this kind of like party lifestyle, and it can definitely get that way. And I think it's very easy when you're on tour for the party lifestyle to kind of like take over. You finish a show, and in the dressing room there's a crate of 50 beers, and every night you're going in. You just have 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, but then you start to lose the sense of kind of what is Monday, what's Tuesday, what's Wednesday, and you're drinking every night. And it's needless to say that I have people in my own life that go touring, and there's nothing wrong with having a party, but it's the ease of being able to party basically every night, and that can really start to affect your mental health, and that can really start to affect your performance on the job. And that's when people then sometimes don't weigh up how they are on how they perform when working, to they weigh it up against how good the party was last night, for example. Usually on productions that I've worked on now, people have fun. By no means am I saying, go along and be a square by any sorts, or don't be a square. But it's important to basically look after yourself and to keep healthy, because when you're not sleeping and when you're not eating properly, it's probably very easy to also just start drinking and being involved with things that won't benefit you. Like I said, Leonard will probably cover this much better than I have, but I just wanted to raise it as a point of my own experience, and from what I've seen and experienced myself with other people. It's just really important to look after yourself. You're away from home. Sometimes you can be away from home for 1 month or 2 months, and if you don't like being away from home, or you're missing someone, the last thing that you really need is extra influences to make that harder. I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the visualizer side of things. I mentioned earlier the visualizer and the software. I'll just use this next section to cover some of the software that is used, and I can also cover some of the hardware. Some of the hardware, you may actually be surprised what I would say is important to have as part of a touring technician. So software-wise, you've got lots of different ones. It's some are more expensive, some are cheaper. If you're a student, the cheaper option is to go for there may be ones here that I'll mention. There may be ones here that I don't know about, but if there are people that do know, other options, please mention them. The one that I would say is a good starting point is one called Capture. If you just go on Google and type in Capture lighting software, that was where I kind of first started, and it's got the ability to plug in a lighting desk. It's got the ability to design in the 3D space, and it's also got the ability to draw plans to give to venues. You've got Capture. You've then got another one called WYSIWYG, which is how do I spell WYSIWYG? It basically, what it means is what you see is what you get. It's the anagram for that. WYSIWYG lighting software, that's usually used by the it's usually used for the live events industry, but like the top end of the events industry. It will also be used for major TV shows, major productions. WYSIWYG is much more featureful than Capture. Capture is a really good starting place. WYSIWYG is probably where you move on, but WYSIWYG can also be very, very expensive. You've then also, that's sort of covering the live events world. In theatre, they would use Vectorworks, and there's one more which has just escaped my mind, but Vectorworks is another design piece of software. Essentially does the same as the other two, but has different features. If I think of the fourth one, I will mention it randomly. Then moving on to the design side, I'd probably say we'll probably be wrapping up in about 10 minutes, as this will probably be the last topic from me. On the design side, on the hardware side, my bad. You've got laptops, you've got USBs, and the one that you might be surprised is luggage. Now, on the laptop side, when you're designing, you want a computer that's powerful enough to run the software, and essentially if it's doing a visualizer, that could be quite graphics performance demanding. So you want to get a laptop that's got a good graphics card. I can't make any recommendations myself, but I've always been a user of MacBook Pros. MacBook Pros have really solid graphics. There are also the Alienware computers. There's also plenty more out there that you can use. Not wanting to go into computer specifications because that's kind of beyond lighting for me. One very, very fundamental tool as part of a lighting director or a lighting programmer is USB sticks. Now, USB sticks are your backup to basically making sure that you always have your shows backed up and your lighting data is never ever lost. I have had one time in my career which I was really stung by not having shows backed up, and to this day I still remember it in the way that I now go through my process of using my USB sticks and backing up shows relentlessly is because of that one mistake that I made in the past. It's worth saying that if you do make mistakes, you would probably be, if you're in the touring world, you'd use it as an opportunity to learn. When you're starting out in your career, you'll make a lot of mistakes. I made far more mistakes than I did do things right. And that's a really important part of your progress, is not necessarily understanding it as a mistake, but using a mistake as a learning opportunity. That's kind of one of the ways that you build yourself. So USB sticks, without a doubt, just back up, because computers cannot be trusted, I tell you that. Also, lighting desks can't be trusted. Another part that I would say is part of the hardware of touring is luggage. Now, you might also hear musicians cover this and various other people from the touring world, but when you have your entire life, essentially, or everything that you need with you on a tour for months, say you lose that bag, not even say if you lose it, say if it gets damaged, say you decide to go for a cheap suitcase that's got everything in it, and then suddenly it gets thrown on a flight, gets thrown off a flight, but when it's thrown off, it busts open. That can be really, really inconvenient. You can lose things. So invest in good luggage is probably one of my pieces of advice here. Again, I can't really recommend what is good luggage because I'm not a luggage connoisseur. I have no experience in selling luggage, but basically if you kind of get what you pay for, and it's definitely worth investing in something that will last rather than something that will be cheap and might break open. Just trying to think what else in hardware that would be important. USBs backing up, good laptops. keeping stuff in the cloud is always a good way. So you've got iCloud, you've got Dropbox, stuff like that. Making sure that even if you lose your USBs on tour, say you lost your bag, that it's backed up somewhere else. And that's probably the extent that I would probably cover that. I'd say at this point, if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I think while we wait for any questions to come in, or if I just have a quick read. The difference between working in a stationary in a venue between being on tour. So one of the reasons that I was quite happy to take on working in heaven was because it allowed me. It was more of a lifestyle choice than anything else. Heaven allowed me to earn good money because I wanted to save for a mortgage so I could buy my own flat. When you're touring, the idea of owning property is quite irrelevant. Some people I know go basically from tour to tour and don't own a house. Saves a hell of a lot of money on living costs, but it also means that you haven't really got anywhere to call home. So I didn't really fancy that. I like having my own space. I like having somewhere to live and somewhere that I can essentially just store my stuff. So I opted for working at Heaven so I could be in London, and so I could see my friends more, and so I could have essentially a life. When you weigh that up against touring has you away from home quite a lot. It has you away from family or friends. It has you working long days. Sometimes you might not even get to be able to make a phone call to your family, friends, loved ones, because the airport Wi-Fi doesn't work, or because you're in a country where there's no 4G, or there is 4G, but it costs £15, a megabyte or something insane like that. So you have to want to be on tour, I would definitely say. It is great fun being on tour, like I have mentioned, but it's the difference between working in a venue and working on tour is touring can be quite demanding, as can working in a venue, but a venue allows you to be at home but still work on productions. When I was working at Heaven, we had, I couldn't even begin to name, but 200, 300 plus bands have been through Heaven, in the time that I've been technical manager. And it's allowed me to see a lot of different ideas, listen to lots of different music, meet a lot of people. Back to the networking thing, meet a lot of people. You can network in both touring very well, and you can network in venues very well. But it's really down to personal preference. Some of my close friends have done the same as me, where they have been on tour. The touring lifestyle has been good for them. It's made them very, very comfortable. But you sometimes might get to the end of a touring period where you think, okay, well, I've been on tour for 10 years. Now I want to spend time with my family. Now I want to be around my friends. Now I want to be able to, have a Friday night off kind of thing. That would ultimately be the difference between being in a venue and being on tour. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I think that might be all from me. Thank you for watching, and if there are anyone who has any further questions, please contact either Lounge Bar Alton or Kat, and please do get in contact. Also, do watch the next one. That will be about the mental health, Lemon, and also do watch Mike Mallion next Saturday, and he'll talk about online streaming. It's great what Kat and Loungebar Alton are doing here, and I really hope this has been helpful for people. Thank you.